Hey everybody, so I'm starting some feedback videos here for the Project 3. I'm starting with the 001 class, the 1115 class, and I'll start working down them. So here we go. Brandon, what to fix? I like they already have a fix list here. Before I do that, let me check really quick and see what's in the revisions. So Courtney has something, but that was for Project 2. I kind of already talked about that. Alan has an empty folder. Okay, so that's cool. That way I just know what's in here. So Brendan, so you say what to fix. That means you're probably planning on putting something in the revision soon. But yeah, let's check this out. I didn't realize you had sound to this too. Nice. I think that you're getting pretty close on this one. I think the whatever's going on with that little flicker in the spine, we need to figure that out because that seems almost like a render issue. Let's see. It's almost one frame. Yeah. So check that and see if it does it every time as you're scrubbing through it, or if it's just a single frame render glitch. And if it's a render glitch, we can fix it. I think that somebody else mentioned that like he's kind of glowing a little bit, and you can turn that down with his incandescence, so he's not quite as glowy. Or you could just replace that material with a AI standard surface. Gives you a little bit more control over it. Again, you probably already know this, but if you have a file open, whatever that material is here, this is Lambert 1. Well, it doesn't work with Lambert 1. Assign new material. Let's say I had a Fong on this, right? If I choose this type and drop down, I can go up here and change that to AI standard surface. Sometimes it'll break your connections for like your color map or something like that, but I don't think that guy really has one. May also sort of change your colors, but it's a quick way of kind of getting of changing that over, and that way you can just control it in the same way you would with the standard surface. Otherwise, the rest of the scene's looking really pretty nice. I feel like some of this stuff here is floating just a little bit, so maybe move that down a little bit more. But all that again is sort of in terms of the presentation of it, which is part of the grade, obviously. But let's see what you get here. So I think that his stomps feel like. Let me try opening this up in Photoshop. Yeah, let's try Photoshop here. So I think his stomps are feeling just a touch, like the timing, like it's all together, right? So if we sort of watch this, if we're frame by framing this, right? It's like his foot hits the ground at this, or hits the low, or flattens out at the same exact frame that his hips do. Sorry. So what it feels like is that he's stomping, not sort of frumping. I don't know what the right word is for that, but where he's like it's that his hips are moving down, like they're traveling downward, his foot's traveling downward. They all reach their lowest point at the same time, right? And what I think you should do is offset the upper body or lower body, so the foot hits the ground, the foot goes flat, and then a frame later his hips hit that low point, and then like the rest of his body can hit like a frame afterwards. So you just get a little bit of that overlapping action on each step, and it'll feel less like a stomp and a little bit more like a trudge, right? So you see like his head hits the low point at that same time, right? And that should sort of drag behind by a couple of frames. Now, in terms of the rest of that, though, I think it's actually looking pretty good. You may get a little bit more hip twist there, so like it feels like his hip angle is kind of staying pretty static. But you got some weird little bobbles that happen starting right through here. So he gets that like little head bobble there, and what it feels like. Let me see if I can explain it. It feels like you were trying to ease in, and instead you overshot too much, right? So like let's say you have a keyframe where I'm just kind of thinking in terms of curves, right? Like he's going from here up to like here at this keyframe, right? Just think of this in arbitrary space, not in the background here. And it feels like what you've tried to do is try to ease in by putting a keyframe here. But instead of that keyframe being there, the keyframe is actually up here. And so what you're getting is it going past it and then coming back. And I just kind of feel that on like his head. He turns, he hits that point, and then kind of bounces back. And then like it's kind of got like a head shake there, right? And so I think just figuring that out in the curves of what's happening, because it feels like his body kind of does it too. It hits and kind of ripples a little bit. And then you get this with the hand right here. The hand comes up, down, down, up. Right, so it's got those like that little like. I think you're going for an overshoot maybe there. Like you want him to overshoot that point. But it's kind of like the arc on that feels like it's going like that, right? And I think really with the overshoot, you want it to be a big change that kind of and then sort of settles out, right? So just be a little careful with that. I think it's just it's something you can iron out pretty quickly in the curves. Just have to track it down to which curve that is. Something else I would say here, pull that clavicle back this way a little bit. And I think that's going to feel a little bit more like he's lifting it with his shoulder. In terms of timing of the animation, we talked about this. Like he does this like throw it away and then spring back, right? And I think that's cool, but right now, like this throw it away pose right here, his furthest pose back, he's kind of obscured by this giant shield in front of his face. So I think he needs to hold that back a little bit more and sort of follow through from that. And then you can kind of drag him here as he's going forward. Like so, we got these three masses of his body. Right now this one's here, but instead, as he's going forward, if you kind of drag that back and then drag his head back, then it feels like his hips are leaving without him, right? And he's having to catch up, right? And then you can also still sort of drag back his arm a little bit too, if you'd like. And so it's not necessarily that you even have to hold that back pose longer. It's just not having it all come back to this point together. So it's kind of that overlapping action part of it, right? It also feels like he gets to right here, kind of slows down, like his that, like as much as he travels quickly forward here. Like look at let's watch his hips, right? It's like they travel quickly forward over to here and then hit a wall, right? And they sort of stop moving for a few frames, and then they kind of all start going together. So I think it's almost like there's a little bit too much of a hesitation right here, and I would just carry him forward a little faster off screen. Also kind of feels like it's hidden a little bit, but it kind of feels like he's got a little bit of a foot slip through some of this stuff. So I think he just needs to travel a bigger distance as he's running away. Having said that, there's a lot of really good stuff. There's a lot of good stuff working in here. Again, I'm kind of the categories I break this up into is acting, staging, timing, and then polish and presentation. So you can see sort of the template of that here. Acting, staging, timing, polish, and presentation. And so in terms of the acting, I think you're getting some good stuff here, and you're getting this change of emotion of him going from being depressed to curious, and it's kind of a sad curious, to scared, right? So I think it's working pretty well. I think really the biggest issues right now are sort of in the polish. The staging is actually looking pretty good though. So yeah, cool. So let's move on. And I'm curious what your list of things to fix are. Timing, it plays weirdly fast. My keep alive is too much. Yeah. I think that's probably where you're talking about the overshoot. Run is too slow. Slow down trudge. Yeah, I think those are definitely some good notes too. So Ryan. Yeah, I think we kind of talked about. I know I gave you all notes in the critique, but this is fun. So I think the biggest note I have right now is sort of his hip shift right here at the end, or more appropriately, like the lack of hip shift during these little foot shuffles that he has right through here. Like it feels like the feet are moving, but the hips aren't doing as much, right? And so it needs a little bit more information about, like, as he's up on this foot here, you need to nudge those hips over in this direction just to get him over top of that leg. So, yeah, overall, though, I think that there's a lot of good stuff in here. I really like the way you sort of handled the this part here. Like, this is overlapping action here. The head and the chest come forward while the hips are still moving backward, right? And then they kind of pull them forward. Couple of little things to note. You got an IK pop on the knee right there when that happens. And then somewhere through here, there's a little bit of a foot slide back right there, right? I think if you're wanting that to feel like a step back, I would probably have it happen just a touch earlier. It also gets really close to looking like he's going to kick the ball, but I think that some of that's just because the feet are in IK, you're probably going to get a little bit of arc issues on that kick, right? So like we could track it. Actually, let's go ahead and do that instead of using it in this. Nope. Oh, what is that thing called? Again, I used it not too long ago. Let's go back and look at those other programs to remember it. There we go. Canovia. There we go. So instead of watching all those, let's do this with Ryan's. So if we can track this, this may be a complete and utter failure, but let's see if we can from about here. Right? I'm going to right click here, track point. So we'll track that point on your foot and start stepping it forward. It's tracking nothing. Let's apparently I missed delete all the paths. Okay, so let's go back a few steps. Let's maybe track his ankle. There we go. This thing's useless. Delete all the paths. I'll try it one more time before I get frustrated and give up forever. Track path. What is this thing even tracking if it's not his foot? There we go. So we're seeing a little bit now of this, like, see how that's moving in a straight line? I'm losing my track a little bit there, but so it's moving in a straight line, and then kind of comes back mostly in a straight line too, right? So you just kind of get these two straight lines going up and down. And I think what you really would want to do is turn those instead into like an interesting looking like arc, right? And I think if you can get that happening a little bit more, I think that will really help. So in terms of the rest of it, yeah, here's something I wanted to kind of talk about. So this is my teaching moment. A couple of little things. That ball feels like it slows down a little bit before it hits the wall, and then like the fall there on the ball is like, I know it's not a bouncing ball project, but that needs to feel really solid and believable, or it kind of takes people out. So put a little bit more time into the ball. It also kind of rolls back toward the wall there. So yeah, just a little bit more. It also slows down right before it gets to the ground. So just breaking those tangents. I know it's sort of a placeholder right now, but so in general, if you want something to look very snappy, right, you want that change that happens to be big, right? So let's say I'm just going to kind of doodle a little bit here. Let's say I am going to draw a ball, right, shooting across the screen, right? Well, we already kind of know that, if my next frame is here, it's going to feel like it's easing out, and that's not very strong, right? So we want to make that spacing really big, right? And so I think you already kind of have that happening in the character's head, right? He goes from here to kind of normal to kind of a big jump back there, right? But sometimes the problem with that is that that distance traveled feels very sudden, and sometimes still doesn't have enough energy to it, right? So let's say this is frame. Currently, this is frame 5, right? And this is frame 6. I'm just making this up. What you can do is mess up frame 5. So instead, make this what frame 4 looks like, right? And then on frame 5, if you do the opposite of this forward movement, and just for like one frame on frame 5, we scoot this ball backwards, right, before we launch it forward, then suddenly, not only is that spacing bigger, right, we also, just for an instant, read that backwards motion as sort of, counter to the forward motion, and it makes that feel really poppy, right? Really like surprising, right? All of that to say, I think that right through here, what I would do is you just have the character starting to ease his head back, and then he makes sort of this bigger move. I think right in this frame here, I would do the opposite. I would take the shoulders back just a touch more, but I would take the head forward, right? Sort of roll it forward a little bit. And that way on this next frame, when you pop back to here, you get this big change feeling, right? So we get this like forward pop. You can even maybe push that just a little bit further back, right? And that's going to feel like a little bit, almost like an anticipation. It's almost like his breakdown is dragging so much that his head goes forward before it goes back. So I think that adding that just a little bit will help. Cleaning up those arcs. Again, I think I would do an arc track on everything. So even on like this hand right here, if you sort of watch its arc, it's just doing sort of like that. Whereas I think you could have it do a little bit more like this sort of stuff, and just get a little bit more of a slightly more elegant arc on there. Again, you're kind of wanting to look like he's flailing a bit, and so a little bit more motion on that would help. And then I think his hands are just a little too perfect. We're kind of getting that two-finger thing, like you'll see he just has these two fingers, sort of turning his hand, and so like this, you kind of have all of these together. So instead of the hand just sort of being this perfect shape with the thumb, like just kind of mess that up a little bit, like curl it in, just something like that. Just feels a little bit more interesting, right? Just so play around with the hands a little bit, making them a little more interesting. I think you got a couple of neat things in some spots here, but like I like how they go out there. Again, that one's kind of out of profile, so maybe turn the palm out a little bit toward us. Maybe pop this arm out into the silhouette a little bit more here. But I think it's looking like you got some good stuff happening there. And then the big one again is just these hip shifts at the end. So yeah, nice work. Keep going on it. I also do not want to save the stuff I did to this one. Nope. Okay. So, Courtney. Oh my. Oh yeah. So this is gonna look really cool. I'm excited to see this. I'm gonna do not stepped right now and just kind of look at these in the order I think you want us to watch them. So we're gonna do swim, up, and then jump. So not stepped. So I think this is going to play it in the right order. Yeah. So, no, I have that. I still have that wrong. So the swim needs to go first. Oh, you get it. So you get the swim. Yeah, actually, I think this one's coming along pretty good. I think I would change the camera angle on the, let's look at these one at a time. This isn't really working so well. So I think on the jump, I would change the timing and the camera angle. I would kind of get in there a little closer if we can, make this intense. Maybe a little bit more from the side because we're not able to see the arc and the character. And I'm not sure how that seam is going to render down the center there, so that, just to kind of hide some of that and accentuate the pose itself. I don't know how you're feeling about effects animation, but I think sometime in the future you'll want to put a little bit of an effect in here, even if it's just making this thing a boss pond or something like that to get those ripples in there. And I think maybe hiding some of that by showing us a little closer and not as much of the pool will be easier on you as well. So overall, I think the timing seems really slow in this, but I think you sort of addressed that and said that this is just your key poses. So a strong timing pass on it I think will really help. The up, I like this. Actually, I'm going to do the non-stepped. I like this. I think that there's a little bit of some like flattened tangents there. It feels like as he comes up. Oh, I can't draw on this one, can I? Let's see. Photoshop. So as it feels like his motion, like sort of, it goes up, sort of stops there, and then sort of eases into that too much. And so I think what I would do is just sort of play around with that tangent. Right now it feels like it's a keyframe here, a keyframe here, a keyframe here, right? And so it goes up really quick, and then it's this long ease in, right? And so I think you can maybe put another keyframe here, just sort of lower this one a little bit to here, and that way you get this like more gradual ease in. It also wouldn't hurt to maybe overshoot just a little bit and come back. And that's just sort of the overall motion. I think trying to drag the nose just a little bit, you already have that in here, but I sort of accentuate that a little bit as well. And then timing the eye opening a little bit. I like that this is a super simple shot, but it has a lot to offer in terms of sort of cinematic payoff here. So I think getting like some boss water in here so we can get those ripples as it comes up and stuff like that will be really kind of nice. So the last shot is actually the first shot. So it feels, I don't know how the character's made up, but it feels like your first keyframe is with the nose kind of sticking out right here, right? I feel it easing into that. So it feels like it's starting from stopped, right? And then easing in its motion, right? So like what I would do is like whatever your placement controller is that you're sliding this whole thing across, that's your first keyframe, and you start moving it forward, and maybe this is your next keyframe. But it still kind of eases into that. So I think I'd go in there on that first one and just set that to linear so you get this instead, like that straight line into it. The reason for that is because you want it to feel like it was already moving previously. Right? You want it to feel like it was doing this, not completely stopped previously. So you want it to feel like it's just this. We're just catching it in the middle of its swim by. It does feel like the torso is just feeling still a little stiff to me. I have a feeling it's in whatever this control is. Right? Like it feels like that needs to have more rotation in this direction, just to get that like looseness in the hips. I imagine that tail motion requires a lot of hip energy. That's my imagination. I may be wrong. And again, the biggest thing you're really going for this like wave that happens down through there, and getting this like oscillating sine wave as it goes. So, although this isn't like particularly heavy in like the body mechanics, it's a very like nice little animation piece. I think if you can show that would be cool. So nice. So I think you're in the right ballpark there. Just keep moving on it. Okay, Courtney, line. Yeah, I think that's playing way slow on here. Let's try just playing it. It's the AVI. So I'll tell you what I'm going to do. Let's go ahead and pull this one down here. And we will look at it there because I think it'll play a little more smoothly. I'm just crashing everything on a no. Y'all doing okay? All right. Cool. Almost there. Yay! Okay. So, I think this one, like my biggest notes on it are timing and sort of the so I think that the hands are a little swimmy, and I know I've kind of talked about this before, right? But let's doodle some here. I'm gonna go ahead and drag this into Photoshop. There we go. So so the thing we have to watch out for is not completely hitting a pose or holding a pose long enough for it to read, right? So let's say I have a character who is their arm is down, right? And then in the next pose, their arm is up, right? right? And then in the next pose, they are pointing out this way to try to get your attention, right? And so what we could be saying is like maybe this character is neutral. They wave you down, and they're like, "Hey, look over there!" Like, "Hey," like they. So the problem with this is if we don't hold this pose up here just for a frame or two, it's going to feel more like an anticipation for this point, right? So it's going to just sort of blow right past that and go straight into that point. We almost have to get up here and hold this pose just a little longer before we move to this one. So that's the moving hold that we keep talking about. And I feel like there's sometimes when the character's kind of looking around here that, like that one's nice. Like it kind of gets to this like look and kind of holds it. But then some of this stuff through here, it's all just kind of swimming around. And so I think it needs to be a little bit like maybe make those transitions a little faster and then let them hold just for a little longer. And that may just be shifting some keyframes. But I also notice a lot in the hand. So if you kind of notice that the hand, I think, is just kind of constantly moving around. My guess is that your character is in FK, and it's just hard to keep the hand located like that in FK. So what I would consider is for most of this like looking around point or stuff, keeping the hands in IK so you can kind of lock them in place on the bench and then shift them manually, almost like eye darts, right? I would also say I know that you're making room for this throw here, right? So we can see it hit the ground. But I would still kind of like reframe this, maybe a little bit of something like this. Maybe either give the feet enough room, or I would say give the feet enough room because you have that really neat looking shift that happens. Or I guess probably more accurately, I would go for something maybe a little bit more like this, right? That way you get it to fly off there. You're also giving your character some space to be looking off in this direction, right? So I would play around with that, with the way you have it framed. In terms of timing, though, I just feel like everything from here to about here is just taking a little too long, right? So like if that's almost 10 seconds, or it's over 10 seconds right there already. So I think I would just speed some of those little sections up, and I think you can trim 5 minutes out of this just by doing another really hard timing pass. And that would be my biggest note, is really the timing pass. I think the acting is actually pretty good. I would maybe ease in this like tilt a little bit more, and then maybe you can sort of lower the character's head first, like get their heads a little closer, and then push it forward over time there. You could try that a little bit, or something. That's probably exaggerated too much, but instead of like having the head kind of just lean straight over, if you kind of anticipate it back a little bit and sort of dip it in, I think that you can sort of convince us that the character's sort of sneaking up on this box to peek at it, and then being surprised and hopping away, right? I love, again, like everybody else, I love what you got going on with the feet shuffle there. They look very frantic. This little hand push looks nice. I think I would let them, again, kind of like this foot here is constantly moving. Like let it hit a point, hold it for a frame or two, move to the next point, hold it for a frame or two, move to the next point. And I think that will help that as well. So yeah, overall great work. Okay. Andrew, Reason Unfinished. I will read that later. What's happening? Oh. Okay. So you got give me 1 second. Sure. So you have this piece here. Yeah. Let's do this. Let's see where we're at. So I may take a break after Amy's. I'm just kind of looking and seeing how we're doing here. I'm spending a little more time on these than I thought I was going to. That's cool. I'm enjoying it. Hope you are too. So Andrew. Yeah, I think this is actually pretty good in terms of blocking. Still has a ways to go. So I'm glad you got something in here. In terms of the blocking, I think I would have, you have a pose in here that is kind of neat when he swipes right through here, right? I think you need to, I think I would exaggerate that right through here just a little bit more and get that character's arm just a little straighter, and that's going to feel like it feels like in your reference that you're holding back, and I think because of that it's feeling like your animation like he's holding back, and so I would let him like kind of go a little bit bigger on that arm swipe, on his right arm swipe, right? Maybe extend that out there a little straighter. It's going to make a nicer arc, and then it's going to give you something a little bit more to react to. So you throw it into that thing, right? And I think you go back to this and then start curling in. And so I think you get some nice stuff going on there. Let me see if I can pull this into Photoshop, and I'll show you. You get some really nice stuff going on there. I think we can push some of those arcs just a little bit. So you go like this, right? Maybe there, not arcs, line of action. Maybe there, I push that line just a little bit more out this way, right? And then that way you get to go to here and make this a little bit arcing backwards more. Let's try red where we can see it. Like arcing backwards just a little bit more. And then I think when you go to curl in here, you can get that a little bit more of a curve there. Does that make sense? And so then what you're getting is sort of this contrast between, this like straight to arcing backward to curling in, right? And it's gonna really kind of make the spine feel a little bit more dynamic. Watch for your hip shifts. You got a lot of little steps happening in here, so watch for your hip shifts and foot placement. Make sure those are kind of contacting well. I think this is off to a good start. I'll read the note offline. So yeah, as long as you get this in there, you got some room to revise it. So cool. And Amy. Oh, yeah. I'm curious. I forgot about this. Oh yeah, messed up eyes. I know how to fix this. Let me just go ahead and show you really quick. So what happens? How convenient. We have two objects in here, right? So what happens is Control D. I'm going to make a slightly smaller version of this, right? So how eyes are usually constructed is like this. You have this part on the inside, which has the color and the iris and the retina and all that. And let's go ahead and so we have that, let's go ahead and make that assign a new material to it, and I'll make that blue. Now let's do this so we can see it. We'll go ahead and put like a checkerboard on it or something, right? And right now, if I hit 6, I can't see that, right? So what a lot of materials will do is they'll put a shader on there, on this outer object, right? It doesn't have the checkerboard on it. If I hide that outer object, you'll see that this one has the checker object. But when this outer one is on top of it, you can't see it. And in regular Maya render, you could just turn down the opacity and be able to see it, right? So we could go over here to ink its geometry, turn down the opacity, and now we can see through it, but we can't, right? So it's just going to render it as black. And the reason for that is because Arnold needs to know if this is, it needs to know that we plan on this object being opaque or being transparent. So if we go to this P-sphere shape 1 here and go to the Arnold node, right now it's got this opaque thing checked here. If I just uncheck that, we still can't see through it very well here, but in our render, we should be able to see it now. So the reason they're doing this, though, is so you can have this highlight outside of the eye that is round, but have that indentation inside of the eye that's not. So really, we just got to grab that mesh that's on the outside of the eye and make sure it's set to opaque, maybe even change the material on it a little bit. So, so that's what's going on with the eyes. So let's look at, I love your naming convention. Yeah, I think this is definitely looking better. I love the little hop. I think that spin toward the end and then the standing back up. Like I think, let's pull this into Photoshop. I think you got some stuff happening here, like all throughout this. Like I like this pose right here a lot, right? But all throughout this spin, like starting from here to almost the end, like her, or we still about through here. Her spine's pretty straight, and you kind of curl it there and bring it up here. I think you need to really get some more dynamic poses in the spine. Like right here, you know, again, we kind of have this, you know, like this going on, right? And I think what I would do instead, thanks Photoshop for changing my point on the timeline. What I think I would do instead is maybe something a little bit more dynamic. You know, push that up a little bit more, push this a little bit more, so you can get this you know, this more interesting line of action through there, right? I also, and you know, like maybe like right through here, maybe she's, you get this bent back, like just sort of bend it back a little bit more, or you could just do the entire line of action back like that more. And then like right through here, though, I think this is something I noticed in the motion. It feels like her hips or her center of gravity, whatever, has this pivot point right about here, right? And it feels like you just rotated her upper body with that and didn't really move it or anything. It just kind of rotates forward. So I mean, like it moves up a little bit, but like, you know, just kind of moves forward and then moves back. So sort of keep in mind that by rotating her forward here, right, we put a lot of this, like, you know, this is her base of support, and we just put a lot of extra weight out here in front of it, so she's going to have to counterbalance a lot of that. One of the ways she may do that is like by curving her line of action more, but those hips are going to move around quite a bit through that, right? And so I think that I would do that. I would also consider maybe through here dragging her head back a little bit, and that way it kind of overshoots at the front here and kind of get a little bit more of that curve. And then I think as you roll up here, like I don't really feel that weight shift that would need to happen with her going all this weight out here to back up here into the right the right position. So I think I would have some more weight shift there in the hips, but I would also have her drag her upper body. So again, I always sort of divide stuff up into these areas of mass. So you get the rib cage, the hips, the head, right? What you can do is sort of rotate the hips up, but drag the torso and the head back. That's going to get you this line of action, right? And let the hips get there first, and then let the rib cage kind of overshoot, and then drag the head up. So the same way we had the pendulum with all the overlapping action in it, that's going to happen down her spine, and that way she can kind of roll up, right? And that would be you get a little bit of overlapping action at the top here, but the problem is like her rib cage is kind of coming up with her hips, and I think you just kind of drag a little bit more of that. I also feel like the arm just kind of blends down there, so maybe play around a little bit more with, you get a lot of nice kind of overlapping action happening in the arms. Think about drag in the arms. So right now she like twists around here, but her arm and her hips kind of get to this point at the same time. And just dragging that arm behind, like maybe it's still, kind of dragging through there, and then her hips get here, but a few frames later her arm catches and sort of passes it up. It may just require a little extra keyframing on the arm to get that to do that. So, and the last thing right here, like her foot goes from tipped back, like that just feels a little awkward on the ankle to me right there. But it goes from tipped back and then to flat, but it feels like that rotation is happening at her ankle, not at the point where it's contacting the ground. So you may have to add some extra keyframes. I feel like that point where it contacts the ground just kind of slides back. Instead, I think that's the point of contact. That's what's holding her up off the ground. That part would stay the same. The ankle would move forward and the tip of the toe would go down. So the other thing is, like, it really is just right back there on the heel of the shoe, right? Like her foot is kind of like this. You may be able to sort of fake a little bit of that, and instead of it being perfectly that like corner, if you could get it a little bit more like a curve, and sort of bend the toe up just a little bit, that way you can get some of the back of the foot on the ground and give it a little bit more area to hold her up, right? This was a little too perfect on that tip right now, and it may even be just kind of sink some of it into the floor just a touch. Overall, it's looking pretty good, though. You get some great stuff happening here at the beginning with these little hops. I think she... it's still a little confusing about like what it is happening to her foot, and I think you need something for it to get caught on or something. Like maybe she... I don't know, there's a chance... Like, to me, the way she's kind of keeping it up off the ground makes me think that she's trying to like it's stuck in something, like she like stepped in like a net, or like got it caught up in like some clothes on the ground or something like that. And so maybe play with that a little bit. You do this really big turn right here, and I think I notice it most from like here to here, that foot that's up off the ground is really traveling in kind of a straight line down to there, right? So I think you need to kind of do an arc track on that and kind of get that sweeping out, and just do an arc track on that leg that's off the ground all the way through it and make sure it's kind of moving in arcs. Yeah, nice. All right, where are we at, Amy? So yeah, that's about halfway through. Dude, these videos are going to be long. We're at 49 minutes, so I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording. I'll pick it up on the second half here in just a bit. Talk to you soon. Bye.